Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this joint seminar between Smith & Williamson and Tax Systems. So as you know, this is MTD Phase 2, Are You Ready? So effectively looking at the upcoming changes that come in from the 1st of April. And we're also going to be touching on some other elements as well, the use of technology within your business, changes to CT, and things that you should be looking out for. So quick disclaimer, this seminar is of a general nature. We always do recommend that you seek professional advice, and we are more than happy to take questions at the end of the session. Please complete the Q&A bit at the bottom of the Zoom if you want to ask a question, or likewise, you can contact Carl or myself separately afterwards. So by way of introduction, two presenters today. My name's David Gage. I'm a VAT director at Smith & Williamson. Also joined by Carl Everett, who's a strategic account manager at Tax Systems. Those of you that aren't familiar with Tax Systems, they produce Alpha Tax, which is probably the most famous product that I'm aware of, Alpha Bridge and Alpha VAT. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Smith & Williamson, we are a top 10 accountancy firm, a large wealth manager, and we have a large audit and professional services business. So touching on the agenda today, what we're going to look at, a quick MTD update. So what's happening now, what's coming in the future, looking at tax technology architecture, so what you can expect to see in future solutions, what we're seeing in the marketplace, the sort of feedback we're getting from clients and contacts, what you should be looking out for when reviewing your processes and technology, and also how technology can help you. And Carl's going to do a demonstration of Alpha VAT for anyone that hasn't seen that already. So we're going to take you through a summary of making tax digital, looking at VAT and corporation tax and the regimes for both of those. But first, I just wanted to touch on this slide, which I think is really fascinating, particularly given the pandemic. So obviously we know the government's going to have to increase its tax take. It's always been talking about the tax gap. So that's the difference between the tax it receives and that it actually expects to receive. And this is by customer group and by type of tax. And what you will see, which is really interesting, is 13.4 billion is the estimate of the tax gap for small businesses. So that's what the government thinks, they should have paid extra in tax, but they haven't received. And then if you follow that through by tax type, 10 billion is VAT. And then if we look at by behavior, 5.5 billion is failure to take reasonable care. So that's really one of the reasons why the government's introduced MTD for VAT and then subsequently corporation tax, is to try and digitize the compliance process to make it more robust, free from errors, and actually make it easier for HMRC to interrogate your data and effectively reduce this tax gap. And there's no two ways about it. Once things normalize, HMRC will be out there looking to do this. So just in case you're not aware of sort of current deadlines, timetables, what you need to be planning for and when. So in terms of corporation tax, from April 2024, companies can start using an MTD for corporation tax pilot scheme. We saw lots of people use the MTD VAT pilot scheme, which meant that their businesses were more prepared for what was coming in. So great opportunity there. And then that goes live from April 2026. There's currently a consultation with HMRC on how that will work. In terms of MTD for VAT, all VAT registered businesses with a taxable turnover below 85,000 will be required to follow the MTD rules on or after April 2022. And self-employed businesses and landlords with a business turnover above 10,000 will obviously need to use MTD for income tax. That comes in April 2023. Now, probably the reason most of you have joined today's call is the soft landing period for digital links. So as you're aware, last year, because of COVID, that was extended. It was supposed to be last year. The government pushed that back. So now on your first VAT return starting on or after the 1st of April, you need to put in place digital links. And I will explain more about that on the next slide. So, just a brief recap on MTD. This is what we're anticipating is this is a step to probably real-time reporting and actually real-time VAT accounting. So eventually, what we expect to see is that the moment a business receives VAT that is due to it as output VAT, it will have to declare it and pay it to HMRC as that transaction happens. That is quite clearly a little way off, given how long it took HMRC to roll out the first phase of MTD. So at the moment, it's about reducing manual intervention and human intervention, which, as we know, leads to errors. So that can be transposition errors when you're typing in your figures to go to your final VAT return. It can be through Excel errors, formula linking. I think there was the famous Excel error with the COVID count, wasn't there, in a number of cases, just showing how bad Excel is at doing these things. You know, so there's a reason why you should be perhaps looking at other technology solutions. So the three key elements of MTD is having all your records digital, then having that digital audit trail. So this sort of digital journey effectively, where your digital records link to your digital audit trail. So each record links to the next record to the next, all digitally. It goes to your API submission, and then that VAT return is prepared electronically and submitted electronically to HMRC.
Thank you, David. So I appreciate today the focus is very much on MTD, specifically for VAT, but I also wanted to share with you the proposed changes in relation to CT, corporate tax. When we look at MTD for VAT, yes, it's a change in your process, and you're potentially changing the technology you're using in order to prepare your return, but the deadlines remain the same. No change has been made to the filing deadlines or the payment deadlines. Whereas if we look at the proposals for MTD for CT, there could be a significant change to some of the submissions and the timetables that you're working towards. So it's very important to consider your 3 to 5 year plan when looking at technology. So this is an example, just taking a December year end. If you've got different year ends, March year ends, you can just simply push the dates off the 3 months. But currently, the way the returns and accounts are put together, the filing deadline for your statutory accounts for unlisted businesses would typically be in September, and then your CT return would be December, following the year for your accounts. Whereas if we look at the proposed changes, HMRC are indicating that the filing will move to a quarterly filing submission. So you no longer have the 12-month period to submit your return. You will need to be making quarterly filings a month after the quarter. So for Jan, Feb, March, you'll have your first quarterly submission in April throughout the year. And there's also talk and consideration, because your statutory accounts are being filed 9 months after the year end, should the final CT return also be brought forward to align with the submission date for your statutory accounts. So what does this mean? It has a significant impact. Businesses have been used to, I'm sure you're all used to, working to the 9-month, 12-month deadline when looking at corporate tax. And if you take an example of profits made in January, February, March, as an example, HMRC don't get sight of those profits until 18, 21 months later, once you've done your accounts and return. The real drive for MTD is actually to give HMRC visibility of these profits far sooner. So take that same period. When MTD goes live, you'll potentially be needing to report those profits a month after the period. So there's quite a significant change in a lot of the way you may be working when it comes to your corporate tax returns. So again, just something to consider moving forward. So before we get into the details of what to look out for in technology, just want to touch on very briefly what to expect from technology this year and beyond. I think businesses are now relying on technology more than they ever have done before. But first of all, let's look at why businesses are now relying on technology. HMRC has been quite clear over the last few years that they're encouraging businesses to adopt technology, consider digitisation, in order to stay compliant and up to date with a lot of their initiatives. And again, the main drive there is to close the tax gap. This was HMRC's initiative prior to COVID. So the fact the tax gap now even bigger is going to be, we would expect there to be more and more initiatives introduced by HMRC in the coming years. And these aren't all of them, these are just an example. We've got Making Tax Digital that we're covering today. You've got Business Risk Review for large organisations, Corporate Criminal Offence, Senior Accounting Officer, that has been around for a long time. But as HMRC introduce more initiatives, they'll impact every one of you on the call today, whether that's additional regulatory change, more scrutiny in terms of the processes you follow internally. So businesses can no longer look at these initiatives in isolation. And I think the best example of that is looking at MTD. So if you look at Making Tax Digital for VAT in isolation, you look at HMRC's guidance, a potential short-term solution could be to use Excel. So you could invest time to look at macros, links, etc., if it's suitable for your business. And that may temporarily give you a tick in the box for MTD. But if anything changes in terms of the regulations, if it's phase 3, for example, is that still going to work for you? Currently, under the Business Risk Review, where you're using spreadsheets, you're increasing the risk profile of that business. Well, how does that impact the wider organisation? Does that increase your risk profile? Is that something you really want to do? Key man dependencies, key person dependencies in relation to your Excel spreadsheets. How does that affect your SAO sign-offs? There's a lot of things to consider. That's not to say you're going to find one platform that does absolutely everything for you, but you need to make sure when you're making decisions to invest in technology that you look at the wider picture to make sure you're meeting the requirements elsewhere. What is interesting though, when we look at tax technology and customer needs, across the board, they're always very similar. And one thing I would say is when you're looking at processes and technology, different vendors, you want to make sure you're ticking all of these 3 boxes you see in terms of reducing risk, generating value, and managing volume. HMRC are wanting to reduce risk within businesses, to reduce the risk of error. So that's probably, from experience, top of most businesses' lists. At the same time, you want to make sure you're comfortable generating value within your team, within your business, whether that's driving value through insights, whether that's efficiency savings in terms of the time you're spending on these returns, and also to manage volume. Any technology you're investing in, is it able to cope with volume as your business grows? Is it future-proof? If HMRC introduces additional initiatives, is your process adaptable and robust enough to tick those boxes further down the line? So a huge drive is coming from HMRC. People are relying now on technology more than they ever have done before, but it really is generating a huge amount of value through businesses. Well, let's have a look at this in practice. How do we see tax technology architecture looking like now and moving forward? So this is a really high-level diagram of how we're here at Tax Systems. We see tax platforms really bringing the best value to businesses here in the UK. First of all, over the left-hand side, you've got your ERP and accounting systems. Typically, businesses are very reluctant to change their ERP providers or move accounting providers because that's often very costly and very timely, and actually the risk of moving is often very high. I've seen projects last years and years for businesses moving ERP systems with significant costs involved. So when we're looking at tax platforms, we're looking at agnostic platforms that work with various different systems and suppliers. The key is data. We've said that throughout. Everybody knows how important data is. Having a data solution within a tax platform which can consume your data, sort your data, validate it, check it, clean your information is really, really important. Because if you manage to consume the data, check it, and have clean information, you can then utilize that data through various different processes, whether that's to generate your statutory accounts, your CT return, your VAT return, There's multiple different uses. Quite often the data is the same. It's just cut and sliced in different ways. Historically, teams have been going through this process multiple times. A team will put together data for their accounts. They'll redo the data again for corporate tax. A lot of wasted time, and again, increasing the risk of error the more people that touch that data. Also, once you've got that clean data source, not only can you feed it into different calculation engines, should we say, you can then begin to drive insights for the business. So businesses out there use Microsoft Power BI as an example. There's lots of different solutions out there to check, build dashboards, look at that data to provide useful insights for your corporate tax process, for your VAT return process, whatever that may be, really generating a huge amount of value for organisations. And again, what's really important is within this platform, you need to have the robust controls in place to manage that end-to-end process. A lot of the time there's confidential data within that process. So you want to consider, how are you managing this? How are you introducing the right controls from start to finish to make sure you're not only meeting HMRC's requirements, but you're staying compliant and you've got the right controls in-house as well. So that's a snippet of where we see technology moving, and from a lot of businesses we've been speaking with over the last years, they're wanting to move towards these types of models to drive efficiencies within their organisations.
Great. So now I'm just going to touch on briefly what we're seeing in the marketplace. So this is from clients, contacts, feedback that we've had as a business, and feedback that tax systems has had. And I think one of the most interesting things actually is how much time tax teams spend on preparing VAT returns. So we all know a VAT return ends at the end of the month, and then you have 30 days or 1 month and 7 days before you submit the VAT return and make payments. You know, and tax teams are telling us they're spending up to 25 days per return, which means, you know, many tax teams are actually leaving it quite late to actually have their return finalized before submission. Many of our clients and contacts have also had concerns in respect of VAT processes, the use of MTD, the use of MTD software. This is something new for them, and it's challenging to understand the landscape, the changes they need to make, and actually, you know, whether they're just applying a sticking plaster to things. What else are we seeing in terms of digitisation? So many businesses are seeing digitisation and MTD as a huge opportunity. So there's many changes that you can make. You can get real-time data insight. You can reduce the risk of fraud, reduce the risk of intervention. And you can see there some of our clients are already looking to the future. So their whole digital landscape, all of the products they're using, and planning for the tax function in the future for CT, for everything else that will come into place. So there's real opportunity to use this as perhaps the catalyst to look at the technology in your business and actually drive those changes.
Yeah, I definitely echo that, David. I think more recently, there's still a huge amount of people out there who have concerns with MTD in terms of, although the rules have been in place for a long time, don't quite understand them, are slightly concerned in terms of they're very close to April now, but there's a huge opportunity for organisations to help improve their process. So again, don't look at MTD as a burden. It's genuinely a great opportunity to help your end-to-end process. So if any of you on the call are, after this webinar, do have any concerns or confused with any of the rules, do reach out to David and I, because it's our roles, it's our jobs here to make sure we give you the comfort that you are compliant. And if there's any questions you have, we're definitely here to help. So just really trying to simplify it to make sure you're clear about what to look out for. So you may have been using Excel for a long time now. You know the changes are coming in. What are the key things that you need to consider when reviewing your process? The first thing, I'm sure you've already done this, do you copy and paste data? If you're copying and pasting, cutting and pasting information, HMRC have been really clear, this breaks the digital link. So from April, for periods starting on or after the 1st of April 2021, this will no longer be compliant. So if you are copying and pasting, big red flag, you need to do something in terms of the way you're working. Are you linking cells? Are you using macros, formula at the moment? A lot of businesses that are using Excel are. Please be aware if any of those links break, if you may be doing a submission and something happens to the macro last minute, you can no longer make last minute adjustments. So the risk of error within those formula macros can be very costly. So if you are using a heavily linked spreadsheet, just be conscious of the risk of what will you do if one of those formula break? Do you have the internal resource and skill set to correct those ahead of submission? For large organizations, you do also need to look a little bit wider than MTD, looking at the business risk review as an example. The data within your VAT return obviously is very confidential. So how is that data being passed around your organization, whether that's department, maybe to and from your advisor? Is it on unsecured devices? Are you sending data over emails? Is the software you're using secure? If you're looking at technology, make sure there's the right security in place to make sure only the right people have the right access to their data. Something really important bit to be aware of. And some of you may be using spreadsheets without formula, without links, and actually doing a lot of things manually. Adjustments in arriving at the final return can break that digital link. So if you are heavily reliant on Excel and doing a lot of things manually, again, it's a flag to spend some time looking at that process, because there may well be risks within there that don't keep you compliant. Before getting onto a very, very brief demonstration, just wanted to, again, try and simplify the full process. Businesses that I've been speaking with and that David's been engaged with over the last 2 years, every single business you can fit within 3 buckets, or one of these 3 options will work for every single business here in the UK. And it's just a case of identifying which option or which bucket does your business fall within. So first of all, you may be within bucket 1 or within option 1. You may be a small or micro entity, heavily reliant on Excel. So your records may even be driven within Excel. A lot of those businesses will stick with bridging solutions. That may be Alpha Bridge, that may be other bridging providers to submit data to HMRC, and stick with Excel, because the risk of moving away, the risk of Excel is relatively low, and you may not have the budget, the resource to invest in technology. So quite often those smaller entities may well be doing the minimum, sticking with Excel, simple process, and then linking that via a bridging submission to HMRC. And again, it's really important to make sure if you are using Excel, you're not making the manual adjustments from that source data. Other businesses fit within option 2 or bucket 2. Typically larger businesses, I'd say probably small to medium businesses, but with low complexity within their VAT return process. These businesses will often or may have recently moved over to an accounting system. That may be Xero, QuickBooks, whatever you may be using. And a lot of the systems you are using will have MTD modules. So if you're able to produce your VAT return within your accounting system, you're not taking data out of that system at all, and you have an MTD module to submit directly to HMRC, keeping that data in that single system makes sense. It doesn't disrupt your process. It will keep you compliant throughout phase 2, but it's really only relevant for businesses that have low complexity. If neither of these options work for you, you probably fall within option 3 or bucket 3. And they're businesses, not necessarily large businesses, but businesses who have been relying on Excel due to particular complexities within their process. You may have complexities in your data. So data may be coming from multiple sources. If that is the case, 9 times out of 10, you'll be using Excel. Using Excel to consolidate that data. You may have complexities within your VAT return process. So you may have a VAT group. you may be partially exempt, you may have reverse charges. Quite often these complexities or these adjustments that you may need to apply can't be done within the accounting system. So what do organisations do? Take that data into Excel to make those adjustments to get to your 9 boxes. These are the types of businesses, if you do fall within this bucket, you really want to consider an MTD platform, a compliance platform, to help you move away from the Excel model, stay compliant, but actually a lot of the manual checks you may be doing, the consolidations, the reverse charge adjustments, look for technology that can automate those checks, automate that part of your return process whilst keeping you compliant. So quite often where we're looking at Alpha-VAT, which we'll see in a moment, it's for those businesses who are sitting within option 3 who are reliant on Excel. And I'm sure a lot of you on the call today may well fall within that bucket. So finally, I just really want to spend no more than 5-10 minutes showing you a very high-level demonstration of Alpha-VAT. And I'm not going to show you everything, the ins and outs of the software. If anybody is interested to see the system afterwards, David and I can set up one-to-one sessions to go through the detail. But I think it's really useful to give you a very high-level overview of what the platform looks like to help you understand how technology could potentially be used within your process. So very high level, how does the system work? You don't change your accounting system, you don't change your ERP provider. You simply extract the data from whichever system you're using and upload that into Alpha-VAT. Alpha-VAT will then be your calculation engine to check, calculate your VAT return, give you a 9-box return ahead of submission for HMRC. So I'm just going to jump into a demonstration, so bear with me. Hopefully you can all see my screen okay. David, can you see it all on your side? Perfect. So I'm just going to log in to Alpha-VAT. So Alpha-VAT is hosted on Microsoft Azure. We have 2-factor authentication as standard. So every single user to the site will have 2-factor authentication to make sure the data is secure. And once you log in, you'll be presented with your entity management screen. So this is where you'll be managing your screen, managing your entities, whether you have a single entity, whether you have multiple entities and groups. All of this will be managed within one single system, giving you details of the group name, the entity name, the obligation period, when that's due, and again, the status of that particular return. So once you're up and running, you'll simply be able to click into these entities. You'll have a summary of your return. You'll be able to click into the numbers to look at the underlying data, and any return you've submitted under MTD. I haven't got an example here, but I'll get one. I'll jump into one now just to show you. Where you've used Alpha-VAT for previous periods, your history of all your returns will be recorded on the system to show you who submitted it, when, and you can always look at the underlying calculations. At the top, you'll be able to see if you've got any underlying documents, any backing documents, calculations, letters from HMRC, if maybe you want to attach your partially exempt agreement. All of these can be secured on the system. All your payments and liabilities come through directly from HMRC. So based on your VAT account with HMRC, all of that data is linked directly to the portal to give you a live view. What's really useful, and something that may not be available with your current Excel models, is looking at the analytics and insights to the data that you submit. So within the platform itself, you'll be able to compare your current return with maybe the return last year or previous returns, to look at how the data fluctuates, the differences quarter on quarter between the data within your 9-box return, to start comparing your seasonal differences to make sure it's in line with what you would expect. Once you've uploaded data within Alpha-VAT, it can also start looking at year projections. So based on historic data, it will project your potential VAT balance or VAT payable for the following quarter based upon the data you upload. And from a review process, what's really useful is you've always got a summary of the transactions you upload, whether you've blocked input VAT, excluded transactions altogether, removed or corrected anything within your return. And you can make comparisons year on year, quarter on quarter, look at the percentage changes. So if you're reviewing the return, you can really focus in on the key areas of risk within your process. And again, there's a lot more to this, but just wanted to show you a very high level view of some of the pages that are available from day one. If we look at a return process, so yes, it's great, you have the analytics, you have the ability to look at your payments, upload documents. But if we were to look at an example, so how would you produce your return from start to finish? I'm just going to go into a return here just to talk you through that process. So the first thing you would do is you upload the files. So I've uploaded 2 files here, simply being a sales ledger and a purchase ledger from the underlying accounting system. And if you want to, you can always open up the data. If you needed to do any sorting, reviewing, if you needed to block or exclude any of these transactions on the upload of the data, you can do so. Once the data is set up, once the implementation's been completed, these files are attached to particular tags. So you're just telling the system, where's my sales data and where's my purchase data? Once you've done that, you can go through to the next stage. When we move on to the mapping stage, all of this is done for you. So there's no need to complete any additional mapping. It's all set up as part of the implementation and it's maintained quarter on quarter. So here is an example. Your source data may contain multiple different columns, different column headers. That really doesn't matter. The system will match them up to the relevant alpha VAT headers that are needed within the system. Again, everything's done for you, and you can see if you want them to appear in any of your reports, you simply tick them as you can see on the right-hand side. Again, we go through to the mapping stage. Nothing for you to do. This is simply an opportunity for you to review any of the calculation inputs that may have been applied. Here we've got a simple fully taxable business, but if you were partially exempt, if you had reverse charge, if you had a special method, partial exemption, all of this will be mapped and configured for you and retained quarter on quarter. So all of the calculation will be built in and saved within that system. All you need to simply do is confirm selection and run that calculation. What Alpha VAT will then do is it goes through all of the data, it checks that information and performs the calculation based upon the mapping I've just shown you. So some of the standard checks, it will check for you. Duplicates, it will check VAT rates, it will check transaction dates, is it inside or outside the period? And also you can build your own checks within the system. So maybe you're looking for a particular supplier and you want to make sure the correct tax code has been applied. You can set that up within the system, it will save that for you, and you can see here if it does spot potentially any areas that the system wants you to look into, it may have spotted duplicates, it may have spotted erroneous data, it will flag this to you so you can perform that review ahead of submission. And again, any of these orange boxes, not only can you see the 9-box return, but you can look into any underlying reports, any underlying calculation that has been used to make up your 9 boxes. You can click in, review that data all the way back to your transaction data that you've uploaded. So you've got the full audit trail from start to finish within one single system. Again, if you need to make adjustments or corrections, should we say, you can do that. So if you spot incorrect tax codes, if you spot maybe an incorrect supplier or an incorrect date, these adjustments can be recorded They'll be saved within the system. You'll be able to report off them and also produce the relevant journal reports to then post back to your underlying system. And again, anything you need to, you can export to Excel. And then once you've performed your review, it's simply a case of finalising that return and submitting it directly to HMRC. So this today really was, I didn't want to go through a great level of detail, but hopefully it gives you a flavour of what the platform looks like. And after the session today, if any of you would like to see the system in more detail, have any questions, David and I can more than happy to set aside 30 minutes, an hour, one-on-one with any of you to go through a more detailed demonstration or example to show you the real value of the system.
Great, thanks for that, Carl. It's always good to have a demonstration of a product. And just talking sort of wider than that, Smith & Williamson has a big tax technology team. So there may be other areas of your business that you need to automate, process automation, etc. Or you may actually need help to get the data into AlphaVat or another tool. And again, that's something that we can support with. So in terms of, what you should be looking at, we're calling it the plan of attack. We're seeing a lot of businesses using sticking plasters because their software might be archaic. It takes a long time to get an amendment to an old piece of software, or they're having to sort of use patches and things. Is that really the best solution? Appreciate businesses don't want to spend perhaps at the moment, but this, there's a real driver for change with MTD. And tax technology solutions are growing at a pace that we've never seen before. We're seeing some real best-in-class technologies that are all working really well together. And the insight and the data that you can get by automating your processes, by using tools like AlphaVat, it's real-time reporting, real-time data that you wouldn't have had access to before. So it's amazing what you can then use in terms of dashboards, what your business may change as a result of that information. So, our sort of 5-point plan here: 1, critically assess; 2, form a strategy; 3, assess the market. So by all means, speak to Carl at Tax Systems, come to us. We offer products internally as well. We work closely with tax systems in terms of implementing and rolling out Alpha VAT, Alpha Bridge. Pick your vendors, have conversations with them. And then once you've done that, you should start to reap the benefits of process automation and data insight. So that sort of brings us on to our Q&A section.